Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Battle Styles, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code Omnipoke. For today's video, we are going over the Dino data of the latest couple of weeks of tournaments, as well as diving into the top 8 deck lists, excuse me, over the last the last week and a half or so since we last did this. So the meta's actually shaping up in a really interesting way, I feel. There's enough counters to the popular decks in the format that there is no straight up tier S deck, I want to say. People can counter Urshifu, Urshifu can try and counter back. There's always that element of Zacian ADP, but it's not so oppressive because there are just an inherent amount of crushing hammers in the game. There's other decks that can prize race efficiently, especially the Rapidstrike Urshifu deck against ADP. So even ADP in some situations has to high roll on its own end, either by adding crushing hammers back in and then it gets less consistent, or it has to try and lean more towards its GX boss game plan and really overcommit on the side of energy switches and spinners and high Dedenne Crobat counts that then can be punished by other decks, and you have that chance of like just missing your combo anyway. So I feel like there is this bit of a weakness triangle going on with the Eterna, Pika, and Rapidstrike. Then there's like a ton of Mewtwo variants. There's Victini that can play Mewtwo. There's straight Psychic energy attachment per turn Mewtwo, basically. There's still builds of like Lightning Mewtwo going around. And Mewtwo's just getting teched into like Welder Box decks anyway. So there's a lot of interesting weakness stuff going on. There's stuff with Stealthy Hood and Mimikyu interacting. There's Jirachi GX, of course. There's Mad Party as well, jumping into the pool with that weakness sort of coverage, trying to take advantage of less Eternatus in the field. But Eterna's still one of the top 4 decks in the game right now. So yeah, what you're looking at right now is the spread of top 8s across the beginning of Battle Styles until now. And Rapidstrike has ended up coming out on top so far, with a pretty decent win rate going on as well. So yeah, it seems to be the strongest deck in the game. We've decided that Jirachi package is the best way to play the deck, although I do think that the Chinchino list still has a lot of legs to it. I personally have enjoyed playing that archetype a lot. Giving yourself more control throughout the game certainly seems very solid, and there has been some European builds being pushed recently that incorporates like high capture energy count, trying to use Snorlax as well as Jirachi in the opening stages to get yourself a nice hand size in the early stages, and then rely on the Chinchinos to help you piece towards things like your Phoebe in certain matchups, things like your Cheryl at the right time, boss's orders of course, those sorts of things. So I think there's still experimentation going on with Rapidstrike. There's also, of course, a small strand of players trying to play Rapidstrike alongside Dragapult, trying to have that dual type concoction basically where you're helping out in the sort of mirror with the Dragapult side, but also helping out against that Mewtwo aspect where people are checking for you. You can respond straight back with Dragapult, which has dark typing, or sorry, dark weakness, but hits for psychic typing. So yeah, there's interesting melting pot going on right now where you can go into level 3 or 4 of teching for techs, where people start playing their tool scrappers for the hoods that people are playing to beat the Mimikyu in the Mewtwo deck, you know? So it's becoming a strange amalgamation, and it's whether you want to jump into that pool and make your deck less consistent by having your tech and then the tech for the anti-tech, or if you just want to jump onto a different archetype and try out a different matchup spread. So that's what's really cool. There's a lot of interesting counterplay going on in the game, which has made, you know, even throughout the week, changes in the metagame are ongoing. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. If we just fan out a little bit, you'll see that lots of things are top 8ing. There's Grass Mewtwo as well, which has had some big results. Decidueye, fortunately, isn't in the best spot right now. I never really like seeing Decidueye in the top 10, because essentially it's just taking advantage of people not wanting to add a Phoebe into their deck, especially for Eternatus and Rapidstrike recently. ADP not wanting to put in, you know, Double Mawile or Rangaroo, or Aegislash as the easy answer. Picarom's always struggled against Desi, and then the Fire decks, if they want to play a high account of Volks or a high account of Baby Blown, that sort of thing. So yeah, Decidueye is basically just still ducking and diving. Also doesn't really appreciate the amount of Dragapult in the game because it naturally has a shred approach and can sprinkle counters around as well. So it's not super surprising that it started to dip. Also, Mad Party is pretty high in popularity. I know Azul's most recent power rankings had it like all the way up at 3 out of like as the third best deck, even though the results really don't show that at all. But meta placement wise, perhaps it's better. So yeah, Rapidstrike may continue to outpace the other decks in the format, but I think that we are not going to see a huge disparity between deck number 1 and deck number like 4, 5. I feel Victini is still being worked out in fairness, and Victini is currently split up results-wise between like Victini, Mewtwo, and Victini. So if you were to lump those together, you know, that's 25, so right up next to Eternatus. So I think the top 5 decks in the game are quite solidly Pikarom, Eterna, Rapid, ADP, and Victini. The top tier tweaks list that I did was those 5 decks, and that's continued to be the case, but I do still think there is experimentation going on with all of these things, which is really, really interesting to see. And it's not saying that some of these things can't increase, and some of the ones kind of just sitting outside the top 10 can't improve. I think Center Scorch is still criminally underplayed. I do think Victini is an awkward matchup for you, because they can so easily just boss KO you on turn 2, and Senti always chooses to go second in that matchup. But Senti does still seem to be reasonable into Rapidstrike. It never really enjoyed Pikarom unless you are playing potentially a Cinccino build now that you can play level ball, which I might want to actually explore. I'll footnote that now to... I'll make a mental note to try and make a video of a Cinccino Senti, which sounds cool, right? And it was always reasonable into Eterna. It was reasonable into ADP. Well, relatively favored into ADP, actually. It was one of the scariest matchups. So there could still be a small rise in that department. There's been a small rise recently of greens-based decks as well. So let's dive into the matchup data for the top 10 performing decks right now in the game, and just trying to think about sort of tech card includes or things to bear in mind when we are piloting these sorts of archetypes. So right now, Blacephalon's worst matchups is Pikarom and Mad Party. Mad Party, obviously, because they're trying to one prize trade, and they have more easy means of gusting because you're forced into chaining of welders, and Blacephalon isn't really a Puritan one prize deck at all anymore. It leads out the gate oftentimes with Cramorants and Zards. It's hard for you to lead out with Blound, so Mad Party can take a prize advantage there. Pikarom also awkward because they are playing a high Marnie count. They're playing Swells. They can easily buy back turns. And when they are trying to ramp up that pressure, they can move into Tag Bolt territory. You, of course, have 2 stamps in the Pikarom list as well. So Marnie in the early game, stamping in the late game means they buy back free turns off you a decent amount of times. Rapidstrike also is proving to be quite difficult. I think mostly it's because Blacephalon finds a hard time consistency-wise getting a Mew on the board early, which means Rapidstrike can really take advantage quite quickly. Welding decks in general are forced to put down Crobats and Dedennes to make sure they're hitting their welders. You can't really play around that too much. And your main Pokemon, like the Reshizard, have that just vanilla 270. You're not going to be playing damage, or sorry, like item or energy cards to buff your hit points, so you naturally fall prey to the 150 into 120 snipe plays. So those are things to bear in mind. I think this is still a close matchup, of course, but I think Urshifu normally is going to get the better of you in those sorts of occasions. And of course, Urshifu is mainlining Mimikyu, which they can ping your Oricorio, which is a big part of your mid to late game draw engine. So they're also playing a high Marnie count, sometimes up to 4. So that's also going to take an effect in there. Otherwise, you're pretty good into some of these other 3 prize matchups. But yeah, Blount just doesn't have the consistency to fall back on at the moment. And that's why it's just sitting, if we go back here, as like the 6th best deck by like a wide margin. Victini and Victini Mewtwo, if you lump those in together, because they're more or less the same deck, it's just one has a small Mewtwo package. The Blacephalon is just less consistent than these other decks, and that's why it's kind of sitting below the others right now. Eternatus seems very strong, like it was pre-Shining Fates. Pre-Battle Styles in the Shining Fates meta. It's solidified all of those matchups. You know, Pikarom's returned, which is a matchup you like seeing. It's okay into most things. You're just taking this awkward matchup to Zacian Luke Metal, and Decidueye is now more towards the lower tier of decks, but Rapidstrike Urshifu comes in to be that awkward deck. So really take the old Colossal and the Blacephalon, smash them together and say that Rapidstrike is now that meta share, but realistically, Rapidstrike is a higher meta share. So even though you still only have like 2 bad matchups, Zacian Luke Metal has come down a lot in popularity, but Rapidstrike is right at the top of popularity, so you do have to bear that in mind. It does feel like dodge Rapidstrike is probably a better policy than you trying to play things like Weakness Guard Energy, because she is so likely to still be playing Giratina Scoop up next. It's just a good package anyway. And also you get caught in the crossfire of Pikarom playing Fan of Waves. You get caught in the crossfire of Giratina in welding decks as well sometimes, so they can get rid of coatings. And you get caught even by like dangerous drills and that sort of thing in mirror. So I think basic energy Eterna is the right way to play the deck right now, and Rapid Strike Urshi is just that very low win rate matchup, unfortunately, where you need them to slow down quite a lot for you to be able to win the game. And I don't think there's many easy fixes for that. Unfortunately, the numbers just aren't in your favor quite often. I don't feel like trying to go heavy Zigzagoon net particularly helps that matchup too much, and it obviously doesn't help against the Zacian Luke Metal. You can improve your Zacian Luke Metal by playing the Phoebe package, and you can play things like Sableye V, or you can play Palpad, or you can play Sinlin. Take your pick, really, of which one you want. That can really improve that matchup. I think this was a lower percentage if you go back into previous metas, where it was down to like 20, 15 sort of percent range. So yeah, Eterna is still looking fine, actually, in the meta. I still feel like it's easily solidified in the top 5 and won't be changing too much, even with Rapid Strike being like 15 to 20% of the meta at the very high end. I feel like Eternatus will still be surviving. Mad Party is still in that strange spot. You don't enjoy the amount of Eternatus that is sticking around too much. You don't enjoy Zacian ADP. Even with new additions of Level Ball to get out the gate faster, potentially people adding in a Rope as well as Great Catcher to try and push that ADP out the way so you can hit other stuff. It's just not easy enough for you to always hit your Exile before they're gusting and KOing it, unfortunately. And even so, like, you need to find ways to even KO Dedenne with a Gust play, which isn't always the easiest. So I think double Great Catcher count, possibly a Rope in there as well, is going to give you the best chance against Zacian ADP, but it still seems pretty negative for us. Otherwise, Rapid Strike, surprisingly, is not the easiest matchup. I think, obviously, Rapid Strike is playing Zignet. They play Mew. They can play things like Chinchino, or they can play other... They can just strafe and knock out Mad Parties in the opening stages. So they have lots of ways to just put the pressure on early. And again, it's one of those archetypes that's forcing Gust all the time from you, which is a little bit awkward. Obviously, you can hit that weakness, but only once you've dealt with the Mimikyu. So yeah, those are kind of things to bear in mind. Rapid Strike, I feel like that could be becoming more of a 50-50 as Mad Party gets more refined. It's weird. Mad Party has always been like within like 3 or 4 cards of lists, since just because of your restrictions, right? You need to play so many Pokemon, you need to play so many Ball Search cards. The supporter line is pretty tight, and your energy count is like 7 or 8 if you want to play the high end, right? So there's not too much flexibility you can do with Mad Party, but I still think there can be a couple of tweaks. I think Rope is one of the biggest things that I think is important in Mad Party going forward. Pikarom still doing fine. Your worst matchups, Zacian Luke Metal surprisingly low. I actually feel this is a fine matchup whenever I've played it. I feel like these numbers could be bumped up a little bit higher. There's not too much from the new sets that make me think this matchup should be any worse, so I feel like it should still be winnable for the Pika. Rapid Strike, obviously an awkward one. It's one of those things where you don't want to start committing things like Stealthy Hood into this deck, but you kind of have to, because Rapid Strike's certainly teching for Mewtwo in general, so you can't really expect to get Mewtwo value. A potentially smarter move could be going to double Tag Switch instead, so you can sort of burst a Mewtwo into play instead, so they can't just hit it with that Mimikyu. And even if you are just doing like a Tag Bolt, you get your value, then they hit it, and then the Mimikyu shuts you off. Maybe you could then Tag Switch off onto another thing. So more experimentation with Mewtwo. With Pikarom. There's a few ways you can go about it. You can try and make the Mewtwo more sort of bursty, or you can try and play the Stealthy Hoods and Electrify onto it more standardly, knowing that you can get wrecked by Tool Scrapper, techs, and other things like that. So those are the things that I'm kind of most worried about. Also, Mad Party is a pretty awkward matchup for you, just because the numbers are so easy for them to hit. Again, you're just going to get hit for weakness, so you're leaning into a Pikarom, which has 240 hit points, which is an easy break point for them, without overcommitting too many Mad Partiers, which is kind of scary. And we don't have too many like sort of combat mechanics. The Swell doesn't stop them at all. They have a decent draw engine to fall back on, so even if you are stamping them, their deck size is only like 15 cards and they need an energy to beat you. So yeah, that's not too easy for you overall. And of course, they play the double Great Catchers and stuff like that as well, so they can proactively KO Pikarom in like high roll situations after you've Bolt and Electrified onto it. So that's something to keep in mind, but these aren't the worst. Like, losing to Mad Party is not the worst. Losing to Urshi is a little bit awkward. I say losing, I mean, it's almost a 40%, but yeah, those are the things you've got to bear in mind. For Rapidstrike, look at the matchup spread. The matchup spread is starting to look very, very clean for Rapid. You can see why it's doing so well. You have an extremely powerful Eterna. You're surprisingly strong into Mad Party. You're strong into Pika. You're strong into Blounds. You don't mind some of this middle stuff. Like any of the welding decks, you're kind of close against. And this is Rapid, like, not even really teching. They're playing Dojos, which is like kind of a fire tech because it allows you to hit 190 a lot easier. Which gets the Victinies, which gets the aggro Heatran kind of decks. Well, the plays that the Weld decks try and do against you a lot of the time. But you could improve those fire matchups if you want to go swell based instead. I know the numbers change a lot if you're not playing the Dojo. It can be worse in Mirror, for example, because you are forced into a real 2-shot rather than a real 3-shot rather than trying to make a 2-shot happen if you start going behind. So those are things to bear in mind. But the only real bad matchup is Zacian Luke Metal. Is one of those things where you can play that Phoebe if you want to, but they're playing double Malolana, high tag call counts at the moment, which makes it very difficult for you to still get through a Zamazenta. So at the moment, I'm of the camp of just saying take one bad matchup and accept that Zacian Luke Metal isn't the most popular of decks, and there is enough fire to hopefully keep them at bay right now. But we'll look at those matchup spreads in a bit. Victini is doing well. So I basically want to look at the Victini and the Victini Mewtwo. They're right next to each other, really. So the Mewtwo element improves your Blounds because you have better ways to deal with Blacephalons, I would imagine, and better ways to deal with the Reshizard that they will burst on the scene earlier, because you can go tag team versus tag team kind of thing. You have a substantially worse Eterna, because you don't want to put tag teams into play. You have a worse Mad Party as the Mewtwo variant, because you, again, can't use half of your deck. You have a slightly better Pikarom, that's more or less the same. More or less the same for the Urshifu, which is surprising, right? Regular Victini and Mewtwo Victini. You'd think that the Mewtwo package is actually improving the Urshifu matchup, but it seems on paper it's not so much, which is, yeah, again, pretty surprising. I actually think people are playing too high of a Mewtwo package in Victini right now. I think 2 Mewtwo, 1 Incineroar, 1 Family Zard, 1 Reshizard, 1 Heatran is too thick of a package. I feel like the optimal package for Victini Mewtwo, or just Victini, whatever you want to call it, is 1 Mewtwo, 1 Heatran, 1 Reshizard, and that's it. Because you're committing too many spaces to not hitting your welders, not hitting your researchers, not playing stamps in some cases, which really makes me nervous. So I feel like the optimum points for the Victini is stripping back that Mewtwo count a little bit and just trying to simplify the deck all over again. Because I feel like with all the Urshis playing so many tech cards, and especially being open deck lists, they will put down their Jirachi GX against you, which is really annoying. They will play their Mimikyu as well, so you can't even proactively Mewtwo. You need to save a Mewtwo and save your GX attack, more importantly, so that you can just drop a Mewtwo, weld a 2 to it, attach to it, and just GX for 400 damage. You should always be bursting a Mewtwo onto the scene against a Rapidstrike Urshi. You should not be going full into that Mewtwo game plan because they have the techs for more heavily reliant Mewtwo decks. So I feel like you should strip back that Mewtwo count. And the stats show that, right? Regular Victinis compared to the Victini Mewtwo's, they're basically the same in their win rate, which is close. And it's good to have a 50-50 win rate against Urshi. Not many decks can boast that. But it's interesting that like the 7-card Mewtwo package isn't correct necessarily in the data. Interestingly, the Mewtwo variant is quite good into the mirror match, which is actually quite notable. Again, I feel like this should be rectified if the regular Victini does have still like that 3-card Mewtwo mini package going on. That's my personal bias. And that's the mirror match the other way around. You're pretty weak into the straight-up Welder Mewtwo variant, but it's slightly safer into regular Victini. Still kind of awkward. Again, it's just because Victini VMAX isn't that efficient into other tag team matchups. The regular Victini V is still reasonable, but you do give up multiple 2-price Pokemon, which then allows them to do their Naga Snipes and just gust the Crobats into Denays for game, which is awkward. And the Victini is obviously good into the Luke Metal and reasonable into Zacian ADP. Slightly worse for the Mewtwo side. Again, I think that's more just the variance because you have worse draws as the Mewtwo package because you're lumping in like 5 bad cards that don't draw most of the time. And you're a Welder deck already, so your draw is naturally limited. The Welder Mewtwo, this is one that is more focused around your Mewtwo and Mew tag team, probably playing Auroras, I would imagine, or just straight Firebox Mewtwo. Essentially, you take out the Victini part. is the difference. And you end up having a terrible Mad Party. I think this is phenomenal because you can easily play SBDO and one tech that matchup, and you will have a much, much better time. So that's a one-card tech include that can completely swing that matchup to favorable, in my opinion. As long as you don't prize the boy, and you actually hit your early welders. That can be very strong. It's weird, like, you need to be playing hoods right now, so you can't tech for Returner. You can't play your stealthy. You can't play your big charms, which would improve this matchup. Pikarom, I don't know if there's many easy techs for this matchup. Surprising how weak this is. I guess, again, if Pikarom is going heavier down the tag call route, they can have bursty Mewtwo's, which makes things scary for you. And they're probably just more consistent than you, more often than not, and can stamp you down. Whereas your stamps are far less effective against a Pikarom because they're just going to have games set on board, basically, with 10 energies in play in the later stages. But you're good against a lot of these other decks. Having a reasonable ADP, good into Zacian League Metal as well is not bad. How are you into Rapid? Yeah, pretty good into Rapid. So all the Welder decks are like 50-50 into the Rapid. Rapidstrike at the moment is playing, again, it's playing no swell and one stamp. So sometimes the Welder decks get ahead, stay ahead against the Rapid, and sometimes they just don't. So that's interesting. Zacian ADP obviously isn't going to go anywhere. You have, even your worst matchups are 40%. So always pretty reasonable. If you want to tech for Eterna, I feel like Big Charm is probably the easiest way you can go about that. Pikarom, the easiest way you can tech for that is just having a higher switch count, realistically. Rapidstrike could play Mew quite easily, but again, this is an almost 50-50 matchup, and saying teching for it could feel like overkill. I don't feel like Mewtwo and Mew tag team is necessarily worth teching for. Sorry, I don't think it's a reasonable tech. I think it's actually quite a bad tech in ADP. That's fallen by the wayside after the opening few weeks, so that's not too much of a surprise there. So yeah, what matchups is the Sword really improving? So the Sword is improving the Pikarom matchup, which is weak, naturally. And it's improving that Zacian Luke Metal, making it as strong as it is. The Sword is pretty bad against a lot of the other stuff, though. So because the Pikarom's so popular, I feel like you could improve that. Also, I think improving both Eterna and Pikarom would be playing Oricorio GX. Now, I do know that Eterna is probably playing Power Plants at the moment, alongside Crushing Hammer. Basically, the two Hammer variants are the things that are giving you trouble, right? Because sometimes you just run out of steam as the Zacian ADP deck. You just don't have all your sources accessible, and you're not able to boss on the right turns, especially against Eterna. So if you play the Oricorio, it gives you extra dig into the deck to get that last sorcerer plus boss combo. I feel like that will serve you good, or serve you well, I should say. And also, obvious tech for Eterna is that second more wild copy, which I think is just very solid. So yeah, I think those would be the things that I'd look for in my Zacian ADP. I'm saying all this stuff before we look at the top 8 results. Just a stream of consciousness, and then I'll see how right/wrong I was based on the actual standings. And then the last deck, Zacian League Metal, kind of towards the bottom. It's a weird one because it does feel very dodge and weave. You got to dodge those fire ones, of course. You want to be targeting Rapid. You want to be targeting Eterna. That hasn't changed too much. You used to have a much higher win rate against Eterna. They do actually have outs against you now, so it's not just as simple as, lol, I got down a Zamazenta GG. You actually need to continue to play the game, which actually makes things a lot closer. But you're reasonable into most of the matchups, and you don't have the best Zacian, which isn't great. Zacian ADP, I should say. So those are things to bear in mind. I mean, you can play things like Toughness Capes to improve your Zacian ADP, split your Goggle and Cape count to have better hit points, and even play your way around Rusted Sword. So a few tricks up your sleeve there. All right, now that we've... So typically I do this meta breakdown stream of consciousness at the end of the video. Let me know if you prefer it at the start, or if you'd like me to jump straight into lists first, because I've been mixing up the order right now. So we will start at the Atlas Mini, which was only, I think, 70-something player event. Definitely less than 100 players. But it was won by Pikarom. It went 9-1-1. So still very, very good win rate on the deck. And this looks just cream of the crop standard Pikarom. Things to bear in mind, I think you can possibly drop down to 1 swell at the moment. I feel like you need to make a greed cut somewhere to try and add in that second tag switch, like I was saying earlier, to try and make that bursty Mewtwo happen more often against the Rapidstrike. Or if you don't play burst Mewtwo, you can play Hoods. So those would be my options that I basically give you guys for Pikarom. I think going forward, I would like to see those changes. Cashman, Cashvinder is playing, playing Victini. This is straight Teeny, no Mewtwo package at all. Playing Giratina, Scoop Up Net, and Jirachi. So it's weird. We've seen a school of thought with Jirachi and no Jirachi. I still like Jirachi. You do get a lot of value here with that Tina. You're playing double Volk, which is kind of cool as well. So you have enough outs against the Decies and you're not just losing. One stamp seems kind of fine. Don't mind the supports count, but I still would like to see at least one research in here. I'd probably drop a com for research just for those interim turns where you get away with using max victory and that's part of your win condition rather than needing to have backup energies all over the board. But otherwise looking like a very, very solid 60 here. Then we've got Eterna in top 4. Playing those weak guard energies. I feel like this is getting diminishing returns now that a lot of Urshis are playing Giratina. I would expect Giratina to be in the deck. The Phoebe Power Pad combo seems pretty standard these days, and if you do want to have game against Zacian, Luke Metal, it's kind of mandatory at this point. Playing the Tool Jammer in here can be nice and disruptive, certainly against Zacian decks, and certainly against Urshifus as well, which are quite reliant on those balloons. Seems like certainly a reasonable include. Is there any particular other matchup that you want to play the Jammer for? I guess any tag team that's trying to play Big Charm, you can also catch there. So you actually catch a good amount of cards just with one tech, so that seems pretty reasonable. I actually think I prefer that to playing like a Drill or a Tool Scrapper, because it's insta-play, right? Which is always good for you. Got some more Pika ROMs coming in. Again, not too much to be said here. I think one Swell is certainly fine. I don't think I like double Yell. I think I play one Yell, one Fan. But other than that, that seems completely fine. We've got Mad Party. Not too much changing with Mad Party either at this point. We all know what we're looking at with Mad Party realistically. The level balls just come in so nicely. What else have we got? We got ADP. Any treats in the ADP deck? Not so much. Tool Scrapper is one of those strange cards. I also... this is like a really techie ADP, right? Super techie. The Mewtwo, the Empoleon, the Tool Scrapper. Playing no spinners either. You just have to hit... Oh no, sorry, I'm blind. You are playing the spinners. Okay, fine. Fine. Playing no Skylar. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the type coverage techs so much. It gives you some use to E-switches in the mid to late game, but it still feels bad when you're making the push for those outs, because you've probably spent one or two in the opening stages just making that dig work to try and get that GX off. So it feels win more. Like, if you've already been able to Ultimate Ray, you should be closing that game almost all the time. We're seeing a Luke Metal that's teching in Labyrinth, which is kind of cheeky. I do like the split of the tools. Seems very reasonable. Double Catcher, I'm actually surprisingly... I prefer just one Capture, realistically. I probably would go to the full 4 coatings. It just seems that important right now to give yourself any chance against the fire decks. Playing the Aegislash, I can never question too much. It's certainly a reasonable include. And finally, we have another Teeny. See, when your package is these two cards, it feels so simple to me to add in one Mewtwo and still get value for like a late game burst against an Urshi all the time. And this just makes the Urshi play differently, right? Especially in my Victini, I would certainly play Cram as well. Cram seems very important. In this list, it's one of those things where I don't mind the Marshadow being in here, but I also kind of like just 4th Hearth anyway, just for sort of odds. I guess they're playing the Marshadow as a potential extra reasonable start for you. I think if you're not playing Jirachi either, I'd like to see Kricketune in here to give yourself some stamp proofing, because you are still a welding deck at the end of the day. And sometimes that is your win condition. But yeah, that was the Atlas Mini. We also have the Chill series with 200 free battle styles. Wow, busted. It was won by Rapidstrike. Rapidstrike coming in. I really like Mewtwo. Mewtwo's not in every Rapidstrike list, but when you're playing Scoop Up Net, it seems very valuable to try and make the space for this guy. Also making the space for the Phoebe, which I respect. You don't just want to lose to stuff. This is not playing the Mimikyu. I actually kind of like not playing Mimikyu, because it's one of those things, like, you're either playing Mimikyu and Scrapper, Or you're just not getting involved and saying, all right, fine, Mewtwo, you can do your stealthy hood thing. I've still got the Jirachi to fall back on. That skews their prize trade enough for you to still beat them with Gale Thrust and Gmax Rapid Flow, because if they're hooding up, they're not big charming up, which means you have the easy 270 approach against them. So it's one of those things where you double up or you play none, in my opinion. Again, that's one thought for me. And really, from this list, I would basically play this entire 60, and then just your only question mark is, do I want to tech for the walls today or not? That would be my only real question mark right now. So yeah, really nice list. 15-1-1. What a great result. We have an Eterna in at second. This is pretty cookie cutter, pretty straightforward. Looking good. I don't mind it. I don't mind Swell over Power Plant. Both seem reasonable to me. There are upsides to both, really. There's not a huge amount of stadium removal, and the Swell is quite good into Rapidstrike, because at least you're stopping the Dojo 1-bomb Gale Thrust play, which has some value to it, and you cheat a space back in your deck, which is kind of nice as well. So I can see that being reasonable for sure. Power Plant's just one of those cards that sometimes you randomly win off of it, but you don't expect to win off of it too much. Another Pikarom. These Pikaroms all sort of blend into one. This one's playing 4 Bolton. That's the only twist in that list. We have a ADP-zation. This one's looking much more to my taste. Looking very solid overall. The 2-2 split of Rope Switch. Don't mind it too much. When you play Skylar, I definitely think splitting is correct. I just don't know what the split is. I've certainly played games where Rope is really annoying to put down, and then when it's like completely busted. So you want to have some element. It's just how heavily you lean into it. We're seeing the Malolana heal package, or sorry, the Tag Call, Big Charm, Guzhala heal package of Desi. Also adding in the Goon now as well. Gives you extra damage burst option if you need to. Just use their abilities, and it's an attacking present as well for you. Presence, I should say. And it's playing that little Snorlax line in there as well. Seems reasonable. It's an annoying wall. You're just really hoping that people aren't teching for you, more or less. Or you can beat their techs, or their techs aren't strong enough. We have another fairly straightforward looking ADP. This is my favorite support account, 4411 right now. I really do like this count. Big Charm, I can certainly see why it's in here. It does help some matchups. 1 Stamp as well. When you play this Skylar, I can certainly see why 1 Stamp is reasonable. Because sometimes you can just Elder Gossip, which is kind of cool. Not a huge fan of just Double Cherish. And again, if you're playing Skylar, I like a split between Rope and Switch. So a few things going on here, but again, a fairly simple list. I think Hydrodene is also pretty good, to be honest, just because it is late game push all the time, which never hurts you. We have a Dark Mewtwo list. Now, I haven't played around with this yet. I do like the SBDO. It seems like a really important card in any Mewtwo variant right now that can obviously play Auroras or Psychic Energies. And I'm going to have to get back to you on this because we are playing a stage 2 at the end of the day. You just have to hit it. We do know that some Mewtwo's get away with just 1 attach per turn, so it can be done. Yeah, I need to get back to you on this before I give you any real opinions. My initial knee-jerk reaction is, hold on, what tools was he playing? Yeah, no hoods, right? It was just Big Charms. Monka S. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be winning again anytime soon, realistically. We have a Mad Party. Looking all in order. Nothing too much to say about it. Looking pretty safe. It's things like this where, like, 3rd Air Balloon, I think min-maxing, you could change 1 to be a Rope, and then you get a bit of min-maxing against ADP. And it's an extra just pushback, which seems reasonable to me. And that's just, like, one thing, I think. And I think you can also sometimes get a space if you just play 3 teacups rather than 4. But that's really up to you. Next up, we have the Limitless Major. It was actually won by a Mad Party that went 14-3. Mad Party's really been doing well recently. Look, the 1 Rope, the min-maxing, you love to see it. That's what I love to see. This is a great list. Love this list. This is looking really solid. And again, making the statement of just having 1 additional out. Whenever you can play an A-spec extra consistency card, always try and do it. Seems very cool. Nice. Nice looking list there. Nice looking list. It was able to beat a Rapidstrike in the finals. This list is playing the Mimikyu. It's one of those things where now we have the hindsight. Now that we, like, at this point in the tournament, not everyone's playing, or sorry, at this point in the meta, not everyone's playing hoods. And now it feels like people going into this week will be playing hoods. So you need to either double down on the Scrapper plus the Mimikyu, or have the, or just, this is a flexible card for you, depending on how awkward you think that Mewtwo matchup is, with or without it. Liking the support count. I think, again, Mewtwo's just very solid in here. Looking good, looking good. We have an ADP coming in. We'll try and zip through these. This one's playing the Stamp. This is playing Crushing Hammers, making a lot of spaces there for those. You end up cutting one E-Switch, which I think is always a flexi card. You can cut a Cherish Ball. Cutting a Switch card always makes me very, very nervous. Yeah, pretty... Yeah, there's... Crushing Hammers are good, but there is some greed in that list for sure. We have a Victini. See, this is on the lower end of the spectrum, right? I'm happier to see a low end of the spectrum here. I feel like this Charizard's probably cuttable. I hate the split of Victini. I'd always play more of this one. I think 4 Pokegear feels kind of high to me. I think you could, again, cut one of these for a research, because even one research will get you a lot of value. I love the Kricketune edition, but you don't have enough switches to really support it. If you are playing Kricketune, I'd definitely play 2 Balloon before the full 4 switch counts. Fan of Waves as well, being a nice tech card. Choosing to play Fan of Waves as a tempo removal instead of playing Stamp, which isn't always live. Fan of Waves also isn't always live, but you do get a lot of value in the format right now with it. You just have a slightly worse time against that ADP because you can't stamp them down. We have Mewtwo Boomer, which currently is still playing the 2 Big Charm and no hoods. I do feel like you probably need to put that hood in. Not much to say about this list. This is more or less the same list that we've been seeing this entire time. I do think Stealthy Hood is probably a mandatory include if you still want to be playing Grass Boomer, though. Just something to bear in mind. Then we have a Mad Partey. Again, looking pretty straightforward. Mad Partey is almost down to a fine science at this point. We have Rapid. Rapid again, looking pretty normal. This one's not playing Giratina. So you're saying that you can beat Eternatus anyway, and I do think that's pretty reasonable. I would probably start thinking about cutting Giratina. It's not only for Eternatus, of course, because that's like solidifying a good matchup already. But it can be solid. You know, there's Speed Lightnings all over the place. There's all sorts of other special energies. There's Auroras in a bunch of Mewtwo decks. There's a ton of things you can have the Giratina in here for. But again, Stealthy Hoods are becoming more of a thing. Can think about cutting it now because you're not getting that same value, especially into a Mewtwo matchup. Cheryl coming back into the list. I like it as a one-off. It's a good option for you. It can buy yourself a turn, which is never bad. So yeah, looking, again, solid and reasonable. Again, it seems like the Jirachi build of Rapid is, again, coming down to 2 or 3 cards difference at this point. Have I already done this list? I've got lost here. Yeah, we've done the Boomer, we've done the Mad Partey. We've got one more from this tournament, which is ADP, and it plays Double Mortwile Oricorio. I do like this Pokemon lineup quite a lot, apart from the Tuization. I spoke too soon. I also don't like playing this split of stadiums. It's obviously internal anti-synergy, which kind of makes me yikes. I don't mind making the space for 3 Crushings. Like, you don't have to play a full 4 Crushing Hammer. It feels like a lot of people go 4 or none. Whereas, like, even though it's an RNG card, you can try and play, like, 2, and then in some matchups you get 1 heads, and that's enough to tempo you out in matchups, or it's enough to be the difference. So I don't mind. Like, it's really weird that the thought process is either I'm jamming 4 in here, and they become a win condition for me, or I play 0, and I just don't flip the coins. Whereas it certainly can be a card where you just play a couple copies of, or in this case 3 copies, which isn't that bad overall. Next up, we have the Sunday Open, where Welder Mewtwo did 13-1. Is that right? That's an insane win rate. And this is a full box. This is playing Stealthy Hood, Jammer, Triple Air Balloon. I recently did a video on Welder Mewtwo, actually. A few things I'd consider. Certainly SBDO. The amount of Mad Partey is very high, and it is easily your worst matchup, I think, that we looked at on paper, and it's an easy one-of include that puts that way up to at least a 50-50 and probably even higher for you. For me, Low Puff is one of the easiest cuts Pokemon-wise here. I don't think you can cut a consistency card at any point. The Tool Jammer seems certainly fine. Yeah, looks. Ordinary Rod's one of those cards that I really don't like having in here either. It seems like such a slow card for you. Compared to just like a Crystal or something like that. Otherwise, looking like a very solid 60. Very high on the research counts, but at the end of the day, you don't always have to weld. Yeah, nice. And you like early game discards just to bin off your mons, so that's pretty solid. Mewtwo Welder coming in. I think the list that I put on the channel only had a couple research, so yeah, thicken that research count to brickless seems good. This is an interesting Urshifu. So this Urshifu is playing Hammers and is trying to play Dreamy Revelation at a 4 count. Pretty wacky. It's one of those cards that, like, you don't ever dip into the Dreamy Revelation like a huge amount, so you probably can't eat into this count to buy yourself even more space. But yeah, trying to just go heavy on the switch count, the high rope, the high switch, and the high air balloon. Pretty funky. I'm not against it. Too much. I'm not super against it. You don't draw a lot of cards with the Dreamy Revelation. Maybe he's playing such a high count just to start it and potentially have higher com outs, I guess, is the theory. But it's interesting you gain a lot of spaces by not playing Scoop Up Nets. Now, Scoop Up Net is obviously very good for you, but maybe getting overly techie? Question mark? Who knows? We then have a more straightforward Urshi. This is playing 10 energy, which is 1 over the normal. Also playing that Belt. I don't mind Karate Belt in here at all. Belt's nice against Hammers as well, which is a nice thing to safeguard yourself around. The only thing is you have to really play around when and when not to put down your air balloon. We have an ADP. Authorization always makes me tilted. I don't mind this tool split at all, though. I want to find a way to try and make this tool split happen for my list as well. Because Big Charm, especially when you play the Skylar, it feels like you can piece it together more often than you'd think with just the 1 count. And it's also a reasonable mirror card because it allows you to just chuck it on your Dede or Bat in the opening stages. So that's kind of cool. I don't mind that tool split at all. So this is straight to top 4, but we'll look down at the top 8. More Desi. It's playing a Yank Out Apom. You'll love to see that. Just trying to get rid of some of their outs, I guess. That's kind of spicy. We have a Blacephalon. Tempo Zard thing. Again, looking pretty nice. Pretty streamlined. It's adding in 1 rope, which I think is pretty good. Playing the Stamp and the Crystal. Oh, sorry, the Great Catcher. Yeah, seems fine to me. We have a Mewtwo Boomer. This has still been doing pretty well. Yeah, not too much different with this list. Looks like everyone's just copy-pasting the previously successful list. And it's continuing to get results, so fair play. This is playing Dialga. That's pretty spicy. Don't think I played Dialga. Don't think I like the 4 goals. I think I like the split of adding in 1 thingamajig. I do like the energy counts. I don't mind if, like, you only play the coating if you're playing Guzhala. And I don't mind Pokegear over high tag call because the gear lets you get earlier consistency to just not get donked. So I don't mind the supporter lineup at all with the gears in favor of some tag call. Maybe 2-2 is kind of a sweet spot. Obviously, this is playing the super high Malolana count. Kind of more important to have a high Malolana count against the Phoebe Urshifu builds, I guess, is kind of the idea. Let's jump into Hegster Season 4. Basically, at this point, we've seen a lot of the lists, so I'm sorry if I'm missing anyone else's cool lists, but we're just going to jump to some of the things we haven't seen too much of. And we certainly haven't seen too much of Green's Gengar Mimikyu with Omastar package for a while. Horror House is still really good in the game. You have good type coverage. Obviously, you're always item locking out the Eternas. Do you ever have a win against Eterna? I don't know if you ever do. I mean, look at the items in here. 4 Great Pots, 4 Surprise Pots. Again, it's one of these things where I have to play it to really justify all the card includes here. 1 tag call. I guess it's optimal compared to a Bull Search card. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Again, spicy. Very spicy. Otherwise, it's the usual suspects, I think it's fair to say. In the chill series, we have another interesting list on top. That's going to be the the 1 attach per turn psychic Mewtwo build, where you try and go for early Horror House. Failing that, you can Star Search for acceleration as an option. And yeah, you're playing the Auroras to allow yourself to have aggressive Plume plays. You have Tina Chomp plays with Calamitous Slash doing good chunks. You're playing the Hoods, which I think is super reasonable right now. Playing a mini tag call package, which is something I experimented with actually in the Welder build. Ended up cutting it in the end, but I do like the option for this mini tag call package. It obviously opens up the door for access to 3 or 4 of your guys here, as well as your main attacker. But it also gets you early access to Hood, which is always nice, or Big Charm, depending on the matchup. So that's pretty spicy. Again, one of these that I need to play around with more. I've said that a few times now. I'm sort of falling behind on some of the hotness of sort of the outlying decks. Not too much else to be said. I'm actually going to look at this 9th placed Dragger. Oh, it's a Greens Pulse. Spicy. Greens Pulse also one I haven't done on the channel yet, so I'm getting a lot of inspiration today for deck lists. Was there anything else here? This is a Reshizard. Oh, this is a Greenzard. Okay, I thought this was a different different logo to normal. So Greenzard also doing pretty well. So we've seen Gengar Mimikyu Omastar as a Greens deck. We've seen just now that Dragapult Greens that got 9th, and then also this Reshizard that got a top 8 placement, and it's playing a very high heat fire energy count as well as Big Charm. So basically just trying to buff your way out of range of Rapidstrike and allowing Outrage to be insane against them, whilst having good type coverage against the ADP and the Luke Metal, of course, and having the greens package to lean into as much as possible. Power Plant's still super good. This amount of hit point buff is also good into Eternatus, of course. Yeah, looks just sound to me. Greenzard was never like that bad. And the amount of health buff you have now at your disposal is pretty spicy. I like the sound of it, to be honest. Very cool list. Again, one I need to play around with. Let's see the... that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to find his matchups. Ah, here we go. Anything super awkward on paper that you would run into? No, I mean he had a pretty nice run. Let's not. He played a lot of Zacian, and lost to a Psychic Mewtwo, which you don't necessarily prepare for. But still, like a super cool deck list. You do like to see it, to be fair. Very spicy. And then we end on the GG tour, where it seems to be back to the standard stuff, getting the top 8, and actually the Psychic Mewtwo does it again. I believe it was a slightly lower energy count this time around, in favor of some supporter cards, by the looks of things. Possibly reduced the tag teams as well. Can't really remember off the top of my head, but the core seems very much the same, which seems like a reasonable core. So yeah, a few things sprouting up, mostly Mewtwo variants sprouting up, and then some element of greens coming into the mix. Is this a greens Senti as well? Yeah, green Senti coming into the mix. So yeah, greens decks are making a low-key return, engine-wise, which is interesting. I do feel like some people just... Oh, wow. Also in 10th place. The Greenzard again. Wow, interesting. Really cool. So yeah, greens decks are kind of on the rise again. Looks like people are just getting stamped out and losing games to greens all over again with that really annoying game plan of trying to feed people easy prizes and then you just stamp them down and have a big tag team. Or a big VMAX, whatever the case may be. And that just kind of ends up stomping. I haven't run into many of them on the ladder, actually, so still not hugely popular decks, but certainly ones to keep in mind because they seem to be going far into these tournaments. I do feel like Greens decks are certainly archetypes that people play into very, very poorly. Like, consistently, I see people make the most errors against Greens decks because people have conventional game plans, end up getting stamped to just lose themselves the game. So it is somewhat taking advantage of the lack of greens in the format and the lack of preparation around those matchups. And again, these aren't the most popular decks that people play. So you certainly are, if you're like a decent greens player or have played greens variants in the past, you can certainly take advantage of that because people aren't just, they're just not prepared for it in the meta game right now. So certainly seems to be some good strats there going forward. Outside of that, just the usual suspects. I talked earlier on in the video about what I like tech-wise for the sort of top contenders and what to bear in mind going into this next week. So hope you did enjoy the video, guys. Oh, wait. One quick Sander list. Just have to look at this before I go. Yeah, he's playing the birds instead of the chinchillas. He's playing crushings. Interesting. Have to chat to him about it. Anyways, that's the breakdown of the recent tournament results. Hope you did enjoy, guys. Hope you enjoyed the early rant to the start. And if you know, let me know if you stayed till the end and if you like this way around or you prefer it to go back to the other way where we go through lists first and then talk about my overall thoughts towards the end. That's it, though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.